Well, hey, everybody. Welcome today to Take a Break with The Gathering. My name is Jeff Allen. I host this little get together every week. And I'm so glad you're here. If it's your first time joining us, today we're going to be talking about Proverbs and our new sermon series, Proverbs Words to Live By. I'm going to bring in Madi, Denton, who is here joining us today.
Hello.
And Seth Botts, who is also here joining us today.
Hi.
I am so glad. So Seth is our Clayton site director. Madi is the young adult pastor. And gosh, guys, I'm so glad you're joining me. I love you too. It's fun to get to hang out with you guys a lot.
Oh yeah, heck yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
Yes. So it is Words to Live By, right? Did I get that right? Our new series. Yeah. Okay, great. So each week we play this short gathering from Matt Miowski or whoever preached that week. And so let's take a look at that really quick, and we'll talk about this series.
This past weekend, I had a chance to go see my son perform. Caleb, he's my oldest. He's a junior in college, and he turns 21 this fall. And the past 6 months, something miraculous has happened. He's actually started asking my advice on things. I've been waiting a long time for this. He's asking my advice, and I've been dying to give it to him. And I thought about that story because over the next several weeks, I'm going to be talking about the book of Proverbs. And the book of Proverbs is a book in the Old Testament, which is really just a bunch of wisdom from God that's sitting there. And what God wants more than anything else is us just to be open to listening, to receiving it. The whole book of Proverbs is about wisdom. But what is wisdom really? Have you ever thought about that? I mean, according to God, according to the book, wisdom is really about three things. Wisdom is about how you're living your life, living life well. It's not about what you know. We can know things and not do them. It doesn't just come from experience. We can go through things and never learn anything from it. But wisdom is what we do with our knowledge and our experience. It's about how we live. Secondly, wisdom requires listening. So many of us, I think, are eager to talk and prove how much we know, but wisdom is actually less about what you know and more about what you're willing to admit you don't know. So wisdom requires humility and listening. And lastly, wisdom begins with trusting God. The Bible says fear of the Lord, which really means to trust that maybe God knows something that we don't yet know. So those moments in life when our wisdom or our instincts come into conflict with God, wisdom is deferring to God. So the next few weeks, we're going to talk about what God's wisdom is for all sorts of areas of our everyday lives. But as we head into that, we have to remember that wisdom is not just about what we know, it's what we do. It's going to require us to listen. And it means that we trust God, sometimes more than the wisdom in our world.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. If you want to see those every single week, they're on our Instagram page, gathering_now. Go follow it. So Proverbs is a book full of wisdom from God. And what is wisdom? It's about three things. Wisdom is about how you're living your life. Wisdom requires listening. Wisdom begins with trusting God. So let's see. When you put these three things together, it's a foundation for proper decision making. And so here's the question for everybody, including you online watching. Please answer in the comments. Can you think of a pivotal time in your life? Let me put it on screen. Can you think of a pivotal time in your life when it became evident that God blessed a decision you made, or maybe a specific path you chose? And this is heavy, and also, I don't know. Who wants to go first? I want to see if Seth wants to go first.
Okay. If you don't know me, my name's Seth, Clayton site director, but I think my call to ministry seems so obvious, right? That I just can't say anything else because it's just what dominates my mind. So whenever I decided to make the actual move to act on my call to ministry, it was a heavy one, being a queer person and currently being basically barred from ministry in a lot of contexts. It was hard, and it was going against the grain. And I think God provides these affirmations in all these beautiful ways that do require listening. And listening's the hardest for me. But whenever I'm making a big decision, I have to listen. And there's this book called Whisper by Mark Batterson that I read. And it talks about all the different ways that God can speak to us through doors of opportunity and affirmations from other people and things like that. And I had to seek out that knowledge to then apply it to my context. And luckily, I've received affirmations in all kinds of ways, from support, from people that you wouldn't expect, from financial support from the conference to scholarships from the school. It's all kind of came and kind of flowed in that path. But the decision to go into ministry for a queer person is really hard, and it's really heavy, and it requires a lot of courage. And wisdom outside yourself matters. So,
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
Maddie, what do you think?
Let's see, I have a few instances like that I think of. I think the first thing that popped into my mind was when I kind of decided that I was willing to even consider ministry as an option, which really happened in college when I was like, I have no freaking idea what I'm going to graduate with as a degree because I keep changing my program. I went to University of Missouri, started out as a journalism major because I was like, I'm going to edit retail magazines. That's going to be my life, which is not at all where I ended up. And ended up changing my major to communications. And then I changed it again to something more like interdisciplinary studies. But like the decision to land where I landed came from the realization that I might actually want to work in a church, which was so far off my radar at the time. And I was like really struggling with trying to figure out what to do. And I remember in one day within like a 4-hour period on 3 separate occasions, something super random happened that was like a signal that I needed to do this thing. And it was like the decision to step into that was the scarier of the options. And yet like almost immediately I felt this sense of relief, and kind of felt like I could take a deep breath and actually like step into something. And I think for me, that was when it was evident that that was a blessed thing, was that I physically responded in a way that felt way more in alignment than the other things that I was trying to do. And so since then, that's something I try to pay attention to. Like, how do I feel in my body about this thing? And is this giving me signs that this is a healthy direction that I'm going, or is there something else going on? And then I try to like unpack it from there.
Yeah, that's really good. I have a very similar story to the two of you, and mine is my ministry call. And I think that if you look at the decisions made around those things in your life, you can end up tracing back many blessings, right? For me, I can see the beginning of my entire life was at that ministry call. Like, I met my wife because of that. I have all my friends because of that. You know, it's just the same thing. Stephanie Hebert, she said this. She said, for me, it was when we, her hubby, they made the decision to leave their church of 30 plus years to find an affirming, accepting church. The fact that we were able to find a church right away that loved and accepted us during a raging pandemic made it evident that we had made the right decision. And Stephanie, by the way, and her husband, Brian, Stephanie specifically is one of our online chat hosts. And Brian is always there too. And one of these days I'm going to make him be in the chat. But that's good stuff. I think also, go ahead, Maddie.
Oh, I would say, I appreciate that, because I've also had experiences like that too, where it takes me like even moving to St. Louis, it took me a year to make the decision to move to St. Louis, even though I knew that it was a thing that I really wanted to do. And then as soon as I felt myself like lining up in the direction I wanted to go, I started to see a lot more options and possibilities for things on the other side of it. And so sometimes it really is just like taking the jump and kind of trust falling a little bit and knowing that God's going to catch you when you're figuring it out.
So I love that you brought up your move to St. Louis, because I don't want to give the impression that the right decision always leads to immediate like ease. So I moved to St. Louis and I had like a year of sobriety under my belt. I was comfortable. I was safe. I had people, and I was just struggling with like job prospects, being with, you know, kind of a dicey past. And it wasn't great at first. Like, I was barely making enough money to pay my bills. Like, St. Louis isn't notorious for being super welcoming. The church is, but the city might not be. And I was like, God, I know I'm here for a reason. Like, what is it? What's the path? You know? And it was really hard. It was really hard for a while. And sometimes it takes time for that, like, blessed juju to really sink in. And because sometimes hard decisions have a period after them that are really hard, and that period could be a long time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Matt's 3 points were this. They were like, wisdom is about how you're living your life. Wisdom requires listening. Wisdom begins with trusting God. What are those 3 points, especially those watching, what are those 3 points that resonates with you the most? Like, which one of those are you like, yeah, that's where I really found blank? And I'll go first if you want. Wisdom requires listening, I think, is mine. It's always been the one where, and listening doesn't always mean like you're sitting there and hoping to hear something audible. But it's like, for me, at least, it's been like paying attention to what's going on, seeing those doors that are open and walking through them. Like, that's what listening has been for me. And maybe a little bit discernment, you know, that kind of thing. So when I saw doors clearly closing and other doors opening, to be able to walk through those doors, it was huge for me, for ministry. For me, it was college. I was going to school for music business. One of the main courses you had to have was music theory. I failed music theory. So that was a closing door. And I thought music was over for me, you know, but God blessed it by opening this door to join this traveling worship ministry and playing music for 2 summers, doing that. And that was the beginning of everything.
I love that. I think mine is like, I've figured out some of my own tells for listening, like you said, right? So like, generally for me, if something comes up in like 3 times in a very obvious kind of way, it's like, hey, I'm trying to get your attention. Or like tells and how I feel. Like, I have a better idea of what it looks like to listen. I think I struggle a little bit more with following through on what I'm being told, which I think is a bit more of that trust space. Like, I can recognize all of the signs. Whether or not I'm going to do anything with them is the bigger question. And so I think that is the like learning edge for me right now, is the somewhere in that like trusting God space. Like, am I doing something with what I'm being told?
Okay, but Seth, before you answer, let me put this comment up on the board. So this is Maddie's mom, who just answered it the exact same way Maddie did.
We're the same person. It's awful.
Yeah. So Melissa, we hear you. All right,
I'm
Seth,
so
what do
glad
you?
I mean, I don't know if this one's the one that resonates with me the most. I feel like trusting God is the one that I default to. Listening's the one that I need to grow the most in. But as you guys are talking, I think we can't ignore how we live our life matters, right?
Sure.
We've all gotten advice from someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, as evidenced by the way they're acting. And I think of sobriety. You know, in sobriety, whenever we're trying to get sober, who do we turn to? We turn to people who know how to be sober. You know, when exploring a path of ministry, who do we turn to? We turn to people who perform or act or serve in ministry in ways that are impactful to our future, the call that God's placed on us. And so I think there's action involved in wisdom. There's action of like, I want to be able to lean on people that do it well. And I think that also brings that we're all wise in different areas. You know, you might ask Madi for fashion advice and me for advice in another area, just because those are areas that we perform in well. And I think that wisdom involves context, and that context relates back to how we live our lives.
That's good. Stephanie says again, she posted again, that she's a control freak, and listening and trusting God has been the hardest part for her to accept, but has been the most fruitful in her life. I thought that was really good. It needs that gobsmack to the head from God to do things that she should.
I feel that.
Yeah, I did too. Well, and that's sometimes part of the listening, right?
Yeah.
Listen, or I will make you listen.
And it never works out quite the way you want it to when the forced to listen part pops in.
Right. Cool. Any final comments from you guys before we head out?
Something I was thinking about, Seth, while you were talking too, is just like to affirm that one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was to ask for advice from someone who is actually doing the thing that you would want to do, which feels like common sense, but isn't always true. Like there are some people that we go to for advice that are like really fumbling the bag in the area that we're wanting insight and help in. And so just thinking about like, if you're looking for a way to strengthen your friendships or your relationships or the way in which you're operating in the workplace, like if you're looking for wisdom and advice and guidance in a specific area, who is it that you're surrounding yourself with that's actually modeling what it is that you're trying to do? And how can you like learn from them? So I love that.
Because people can absolutely, I mean, Matt even referred to it in his sermon, you know, people can present opinions as wisdom. And sometimes people can sound like they really know what they're talking about, right? Like people know the words to use. And I can sound like I know what I'm talking about. I can know the words to use. But if it's an opinion, it's not always wisdom. Wisdom involves like lived experience, relying on God and listening to others and growing, you know, and if I'm not listening and relying on God, then it's just an opinion. It's not wisdom. I think the example that Matt used in this sermon was, I know how to, you know, be married. I've been married 3 times, you know. If I want relationship advice, I'll turn to someone who maybe them and their spouse have been through a lot of stuff. If I'm looking for wisdom on how to make it through some stuff in a relationship, right?
For sure. I also think that like individual members of a community, like just because you're part of a community doesn't mean you represent that community in wisdom. I think about it in like the church maybe, or, you know, there are very damaging opinions and views in Christianity. And that doesn't mean that they're the representative spokesperson of wisdom of what it means to follow Christ. So, guys, it's about time. We're a little bit over. We only want to be here for about 15 minutes or so, just to be a little hub in the middle of your week. But so glad you joined. And thank you, Madi and Seth. And for those of you watching online, if you didn't know this already, if you miss this any week, we are doing this as a podcast. Also, the audio will be up. Get it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Just search "Take a Break with the Gathering." And great. Thank you. Talk to y'all later. Thanks for being a part of this.